Hello, everyone. Welcome to eLearnChat, where you always learn something new. And today we've got with us our good friend and co-host coming to us from England right now. It is Lesley Price with www.learnappeal.com. Hey, Lesley, how are you?
I'm very good, thank you. Looking forward to summer arriving.
Yeah, we're almost there. We're still coolish over here. For California, we're cool, but we're getting there. I think next week will be warm. Anyway, we've got a great guest today. Let's introduce him in a moment, and here's the intro. Thanks. Lesley, would you do the honors?
I certainly will. I'd love to introduce everybody to my very good friend and colleague, Marco Faccini. And before the show, Marco and I were just reminiscing a bit about how long we've known each other, and we decided it's probably too long to tell people. It goes back a long way. Marco and I became friends due to our common interest in vocational skills and apprenticeships. And now Marco is doing slightly different things, bit more with immersive technologies, but still with a huge interest in the positive impact that can have on these particular skill areas. So welcome to the show, Marco, and delighted you can join us.
Thank you, Lesley. Great introduction, and great to be here, and also with you, Rick. And I'm always made up, actually, when I'm on these sort of things with my peers, especially when my peers are older than me, because that's now getting rarer and rarer as I'm now getting older and older.
Oh my gosh, I think I'm the oldest one I know right now, which is so scary.
Thanks, Marco, for nothing.
Sorry.
Well, Marco, we met very briefly. It was about 1 minute, if even, at the pub outside of the Learning Technology show back in February. Somebody tapped you. You turned around and said, "Oh, hi," and they introduced you, and then you turned around and left. You were gone. So it was. I think we just got bad timing, but it was fun meeting you for a brief moment, and I've seen you on the eLearn and the Learning Now TV shows, and you do a great job on those, and you're still involved with the show, correct?
Yes, I am. Yeah. Not so much as I was, but yeah, I try and support Colin as much and as where I can. He's doing a fantastic job, and I just look at it as a medium and just think it's fantastic for our industry, and the fact that he's giving a chance to young people who can sort of highlight, showcase their work in particular, and give others, and even I, as I'm older, the ability to learn or understand those little nuggets of information that can help us perfect our craft as we go forward. So I just think it's a fantastic medium, and he does a great job.
Yeah, he does. And the show is great. A lot of people probably don't know it stateside. They should. It's actually a really good interview show, and you've always got great guests on it. So I enjoy watching it. I miss it sometimes, but then I go back and look at the previous shows. But it's a really good show.
Yeah, and the fact that he's put it up on the website, and if you don't want to, you don't have to watch the whole show. You can just watch those particular people or those topics that those people are representing that are relevant to you. So it's, I suppose we would call it curated interviewing.
Mm-hmm.
a bit like eLearnChat. So
Yes.
Come on then, Marco. What are you going to talk to us about tonight? Or this morning, as it is in stateside.
Yeah, or this evening if you're in China, which is where I spend most of my time nowadays. It's something that's been bothering me for a couple of months, and it's interesting. You referenced Colin and Learning Now TV, Rick, because there was a show that went out this morning at 10 o'clock. And there was a guy on there, I can't remember his first name, I want to say Keith Keating, but he was from GP Strategies, and he was talking about immersive technologies. And he opened it up by using the phrase, the next shiny toy. And I'm that phrase, the next shiny toy, is really starting to bug me. And we've all heard it, we all know it, and we've probably been hearing it for many, many, many years. In fact, the interesting thing is, when I think about when I started in e-learning, which is 2001, I don't think I was trying to delve back into my memories to work out when was the first time I started hearing this term shiny toy. And I think it was around about 2011, 2012. And I'm struggling with it because I'm thinking to myself, I think that phrase is hampering or dampening the ability for learning and development, e-learning practitioners to actually try something new. I think they're using that to hide behind or use it as a blocker to say, do you know what, I'm not going to try this new thing, whatever the new thing is, because it's the next shiny toy. Because my argument is, and because I wear lots of hats, and one of them being an investment hat, if we look at the amount of money, investment money in the last 2-3 years that has been pushed into immersive technologies, if I was a practitioner, an L&D practitioner in a company, I'd be looking at that and going, am I missing something? Because this is obviously something that's going to happen. And is this something that's going to help me do or complete my practice better? Is it going to be better for learners? Or is it even the bigger bonus, is this going to give us competitive edge? And those companies that have adopted it, certainly in the last 12 months or so, they are starting to see competitive edge. So I'm concerned around this phrase, and I think we've got to try and move away from it or stop putting it up there as a reason not to try something new.
Now, what might be happening with that phrase, because I've heard that too, and with other things as well, and it's a problem with the e-learning industry on the whole, that things are constantly being renamed. Now, not necessarily the case with VR or things like that, but there's so many other things that just, what's old is new and what's new is old. And that's so a lot of the repackaging kind of, I think, damages what we're looking at. Like you said, it's kind of a damaging statement in many ways. But a lot of times right now, the meme in most of the shows is, everything is VR or everything is something else, like you learner experience. But it's not necessarily different as far as with learner experiences, what it was from other things. But with VR, I think it has become sort of a buzzword for, look, this is new and exciting. The problem is they're trying to fit it into everything rather than areas where it probably fits best. And that's where people struggle. What do I do with VR? They don't have an idea what to do with it. And that may be one of the first issues with VR, that the people looking at it haven't yet thought about it. They just go, we need it, but they don't know why they need it yet. And that's why people like you are putting out the information of, here's what it really is, and here's how you could use it.
Do you know what, Rick? You're absolutely spot on, and thank you. Because I think that's probably one of the best explanations I've ever heard for where we're at. Before I add more to that, I'm actually totally with you about the rebadging, the renaming, and the best example right now is the LMS, which we have known and loved or hated forever, is now called an LXP, for God's sake.
I know.
Well, it's so there's a classic rebadging. Absolutely. The fact that we had e-learning courses and we've now chunked them down, we now call them micro learning. Mm-hmm. Well, that's vendors, and vendors are going to do that. But this is then down to practitioners to sort their way through that and understand what's real and what's not real. And I think that leads nicely to the point about VR and where VR fits. And I certainly don't advocate that we should use VR for everything. And I'm pretty clear on where it has its real benefits. But I think the biggest challenge that we have, or people have, when they're trying to visualize it, how they could use it within their organizations, is the fact that if you think about it, up until this point, learning modalities, all of them have been 2D. Even, if we saw the rise of video, for example, so we thought, oh, video's more interactive and more engaging, but actually it's still 2D. It's on a screen in front of me or on a device in front of me. So people are in the habit of viewing the world of learning from a 2D perspective, which actually for me is the conundrum where we're at, because the world we live in when we're outside of work is 3D. So, we're meeting people in a room or in a pub or a hotel, that's 3D. And that's what virtual reality is. Virtual reality, I can replicate. So, Rick, when you and I met in that pub, I can replicate that pub and I can replicate those people and make you think it's you and I back again in the pub. Now, of course, when we're sipping our beer, it's not going to be real beer, of course. It'll be a virtual beer. But the point I'm trying to make is I can recreate in the virtual world what's in the real world, and people struggle to visualize that.
And to me, the big, having worked in vocational education for a long, long time, I think that vocational skills are generally underrated in the country. And I don't think it's just this country they're underrated in. I think it's generally. And for young people to actually learn these skills is quite hard. They've got to be on the job. They've, whether it's painting and decorating, whether it's masonry, whether it's plumbing, whether it's, and the list goes on. It just goes on. And an awful lot of these skills, rather than the learner turn up, go and watch somebody, put a paintbrush up and down a wall or strip off something, could actually learn a great deal from using the 3D approach before they even go on the job. Mm-hmm. And that, to me, is an incredible offering that this approach has to apprenticeships and vocational skills. Massive benefits.
Absolutely, and I think it's even more wide sweeping. If we look at, we're practitioners, we have been for many years, so we know there are lots of learning theories and learning models. But if we distill it all down, we know what we're trying to deliver across is 3 pillars, if you like: knowledge, skills, behavior. And the holy grail, as we know, is behavior. But that's the most difficult piece to get across. Now, the best way to deliver not behavioral change, but to create behaviors or influence behaviors which then become the norm, is through practice. So, again, going back to whatever learning theory or model, what we do know, which hasn't changed since the dinosaurs, is practice makes perfect. Yep. And if you think of it as whether an L&D or an e-learning practitioner, if you think of all the tools you have, all the solutions, in your toolbox, the one that you're really, really missing is how do I enable consistent behavioral practice or even practice? How do I enable that? Well, now you have a tool that you can put in that toolbox and wheel out whenever you want. Now, an added benefit of that is people can fail in VR, and they're not going to die. They're not going to die. So and this leads to the point going back to Rick, and a great fit for VR is things which are high risk, high reward. Mm-hmm. No doubt about that at all. Take anybody dealing in engineering, for example, or mechanical or electrical, health and safety type scenarios. I always use this very silly, easy example. Fire extinguishers. We're taught fires. Mm-hmm. We do an e-learning course on fire safety. Now, when I was a younger man, 15, 16 years ago or so, part of my health and safety fire training was actually to let off a fire extinguisher. but I can't remember I can't remember the last time anyone said to me they let off a fire extinguisher. So I'm going to bet if a fire goes off, and God forbid it doesn't in anyone's building, do they know which fire extinguisher to use on which type of fire? Because I'm not sure they would.
No,
now in VR, we've created an experience, for example, where you've got an electrical fire and somebody uses the water extinguisher, and they then see the impact of doing that. And I would argue, if you can do that once, because of the shock impact of what actually happens in that scenario, if a fire ever broke out and it was an electrical fire, you'd know which fire extinguisher to use.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you. I couldn't agree with you more, Marco. I think that certainly when I was growing up in Scotland, there was a great saying. They never said, "Oh, that'll teach you if you did something wrong." They said, "Oh, that'll learn you. That'll learn you." So, you touch something you shouldn't, and your parents will say, "Well, that'll learn you. You won't be doing that again, will you?" And I think that is actually, I wish, rather than "that'll teach you, that'll learn you," was actually a phrase that was used more often with kids in the UK and even adults. Even adults.
Though, Lesley, I do worry about the Scots underestimating the human ability to really reproduce stupidity over and over and over again. So
let's not go there.
Let's not go there.
Is there anything, Marco, that you would like to show us, when you're on the show here?
So I sent across some slides earlier. So there's a nice link. There's a diesel slide with a video. And I'd like for you to click on that. Oh, actually, before you go on, this is an interesting one. The Gartner hype cycle. So of course, this is always good. I do like the Gartner cycles, and of course, it's now showing that the virtual reality is now out of the trough of disillusionment and now in the slope of enlightenment. And I would say, from my experience and knowledge and work within the industry, that's absolutely right. We're there. But if we then go to the next one, here's an interesting one. So this was from a company called Web Courseworks. So, of course, they're putting virtual reality in the peak of inflated expectations. But interesting, if you look to the far right, it says simulation. Now, I would argue that simulation is actually virtual reality, or elements of VR are simulation. So it's an interesting one for me. But the point of why I put it in there was, again, I'm not sure this type of analysis, and of course they've done it on 2.3 million words used on Twitter, that's their data source. I'm not sure that, again, is helping practitioners per se. But if you go on, there's a slide. This is an interesting one. So this is VR esports. So I spend a lot of time and work in this arena. So if you look at esports is a huge, huge industry, something like 358 million players around the world, so gamers. We now have the ability to start helping people almost become professional athletes. If you think about it, Rick, let's say, for example, you always wanted to, as this chap is here, you wanted to, as a younger man, you wanted to be at the Olympics and be on the rifle range and shoot. And of course, you never did for whatever reason. Do you know what? You could now be that Olympian. You could realize that dream and practice safely and use that virtual gun and shoot at those targets. So this has got huge, huge potential. But if you go on to the next slide, there's a lovely link there. If you play that video, this is from Diesel, the brand. If you click on the link there. So the reason why I showed this is one of the very early. This came out last year actually, and Diesel decided to utilize VR as an advertising solution. And what they did is in France, so they released their new Parfum called the Edge, and they thought they got a company to build this experience. And what they did is they put a VR headset into 6 stores in France, only 6. And they did a 3-month pilot. And here's a kicker for you. Those 6 stores outperformed the other stores that didn't have VR and the experience by 160%.
That's quite a bit.
Whether that's a gimmick thing, don't know. Whether it's the fact that people experienced, had that experience and therefore were at a higher level propensity to buy, I don't know. But what I do know is people more often than not, when they use a VR experience, will come out in a good place, if you like. They're open to suggestions, open to scenarios.
Now, Marco, this brings up a point, something I've been complaining about for years, that the average ID often is not a very good writer, 2, has no sense of timing, and 3, doesn't know how to present in an emotional or impactful way, bringing up the need to have people that are trained in either screenwriting, true animation, understanding timing, music, and that's something that's sorely lacking in our industry. And if you look at the average e-learning course, it's, oh God, it's so boring. And it hasn't gotten any better throughout the years. VR offers a lot of potential, but if we've got the same exact people writing VR, we're going to wind up in the same exact, oh God, that was really boring. And that's my concern, that it's so hyped up right now that...
Rick, you're absolutely right. And I wrote a blog last year, back end of last year. Maybe I ought to revisit it actually. And it was around instructional designers, the normal instructional designer. And what I was saying is that the instructional designer needs to, as we do in business all the time, needs to pivot, needs to learn new skills or new knowledge. And rather than be an instructional designer, and of course, we like to put badges on things. So I tried to come up with a badge, and I said, instructional designers now need to become, if they weren't already, learning experience designers. And I use the word learning experience because obviously ironically that's now topical. But to your point about the e-learning courses, we all know that storytelling is a powerful way of delivering or trying to achieve learning outcomes. We know that. But do we see much storytelling within e-learning courses? We don't. And that's probably because the instructional designer, to your point, Rick, doesn't know how to craft the story.
No.
So if current instructional designers want to utilize VR, they've got to learn these newer skills. And as a chap I respect very well in the industry, and Professor Bob Stone has been creating virtual reality solutions for, I think, 30, 40 years. He works out of University of Birmingham, and he is very, very passionate about something called human-centric design. And I would say to anybody that's an instructional designer is look up human-centered design, because I think there are elements of that we should be crafting into our e-learning right now, but certainly when we're looking to craft experiences. And this is what I get hit with most. I talk to whether it's chief execs, HR directors, practitioners, and they say to me, so how do we create a course in VR? And I go, we're never going to create a course. It's not a course. We are actually creating an experience, because as you touched on, Rick, or you used the words, emotion. We can bring emotions into virtual reality now. We can build empathy. We have presence within VR now. And I know I touched on the sweet spot, if you like, of high risk, high reward type scenarios. But I'm doing increasingly more work now in and around soft skills. Now, of course, we know soft skills really should be called hard skills, so we know that. But if we think about coaching and mentoring and those sort of scenario, leadership and management, we can utilize VR now to drive those emotions that we would want to reenact in the real world into the virtual world. So it makes that training or that learning, if you like, more impactful. So we can replicate that quite easily.
It's true.
I would totally agree there, Marco. That I used to at one point I managed a team of 24 direct reports, and it was challenging having 24 people, reporting into you. But one of the biggest challenges was, how do you create empathy within the teams? Because my team were then working with all the other teams in the company. So what happens if you actually cock it up? What happens if you say the wrong thing to the wrong person and the word goes round, and all of a sudden, before you know it, there's chaos. Just because he said, she said, they said, who said, why said, and it goes on, and you literally, and it wasn't, and when you got down to the bottom of it, the person at the bottom said, I just didn't think. I'm really sorry. I really didn't think. It won't happen again. I didn't know, but I know now.
Yeah. If to that point, if you go on to the next slide, Rick, because this is exactly on point. This is Walmart, Asda Walmart. So or Asda in the UK, Walmart obviously in the US. And this was created by a company called Striver, and they stole my idea, but that's okay, because we're in a community and we're all trying to help each other, so it's not a problem. But this actually was an experience that was built to enable colleagues in Walmart to experience what actually happens on Black Friday. Now, they undertook this training, these experiences, months in advance of Black Friday, because, as you know, there's quite a high turnover in retail, and you are better able to deal with conflict or situations or experiences if you've got prior knowledge of it. And the fact that they built this Black Friday experience and put colleagues through it, when Black Friday actually happened, they had some base knowledge to pull on to be able to deal with certain situations. And conflict management in customer service, I would argue, I'm not sure you can deliver it face to face. And the reason why I say that, I know that's a pretty strong statement. The reason why I say that is, we think about the higher levels of conflict management. That's a customer swearing, pushing, hitting a colleague. Now, we cannot simulate that in a face-to-face scenario, because if we did, then HR would be all over us. We probably couldn't even swear at our colleagues, but we all know that happens in real life. That happens every day in real life. In VR, we can replicate that. We can have an avatar coming at you, and you thinking they are actually going to punch you or swing at you. They're certainly in your face and they're swearing at you. Then the experience is about how you work your way, how you navigate your way via a story situation through that process to deliver the outcome, which is where you have calmed the customer down and everyone is happy.
Yeah, that is such a good point, because in so many cases, HR and companies are so afraid, especially in the States. It's almost ridiculous. We've done active shooter simulations and active shooter training where you're not supposed to have any sounds of gunfire. That's really useful. You're not supposed to show blood. Well, of course, blood could be yucky. And you're not supposed to show any violence. So the active shooter has zero emotion, zero reality, zero usefulness. And by the time they're done, they're all congratulating each other. Isn't that a good course? No, it sucks. But this is what they're considering HR friendly. You haven't taught anything, and if the person ever got near an active shooter, they would be woefully unprepared for it. And to boot, they tell them either run, hide, or fight. And I'm saying you can't fight. Unless you know what you're doing, you're just inviting a bullet. It's almost idiotic what they're teaching in corporations to just basically say, okay, we've done it. We're done. We are completely done. Haven't we done a great job? No.
Tick the box.
Yeah.
Tick the box.
Yes. Check, collect. Yeah. Check the box.
Yeah. If you go on to the next slide, there's another use case, and this is some guys in virtual reality. So they're simulated here, where obviously they're pink hands and pink helmet, but they're actually in VR, and they're in a virtual submarine in this particular instance. And I appreciate, people will automatically think, oh, it's defense and defense got budgets, etc., etc. But put that to one side and just think about it, that this is a brand new piece of equipment. In this instance, this is a submarine. These guys are learning how to operate this submarine before it's even being built. Now, if you look at that from a process perspective, the Navy builds a submarine, or has a company build the submarine for them. They put it into dry dock. It's in dry dock for a month, maybe 2 months, while all the submariners go onto that submarine and learn how to operate it. Now, let's say a submarine costs £1 billion, and I don't know what it costs, but it's probably around that, maybe more even. So for every hour, day that it's sat in dry dock, that's a cost. That's a massive cost. Well, the fact that these people have become accustomed and used and understand the controls before they even get on that submarine, that means that submarine is in dry dock less time. And in fact, it could be it's there just for days rather than for months. So think from the cost saving. Now, I know that's a submarine, but think of it from any company that is manufacturing something. The ability to train our people before it's even completed. Think of that from a performance perspective, a time, the dreaded ROI measurement, if you like. You've just done it there in one go. And we can use VR for things like visualization. I know Google, for example, in Silicon Valley, because I was there. They have their guys, when a request comes in from a company saying, I need to have a server stack and a data room and et cetera, the guys go into VR and they select the various components and build that room for that company.
That's great. It makes all the sense in the world. The military does use a lot of VR. Police departments do. Hospitals are starting to use a lot of VR for surgeons, so they can learn how to do complex surgeries that they may not do that often. And then when they get with the real patient, and also, this is sort of interesting, VR coming to life. There are machines, I don't know if you've heard of Da Vinci. Da Vinci is used primarily right now for women's diseases, or things like endometriosis, hysterectomies, things like that. I had a friend, she had it done, and they used Da Vinci on her. She was one night in the hospital, went 3 stories up to her apartment the next day without any issue, no pain. And within a week, she was just completely and totally normal. Now, anybody who's ever seen a hysterectomy or the results of, it can take 1 to 2 months just to get back to normal. Now they've got it down to 1 to 3 or 4 days. And that's really in a virtual, if you look what the surgeon has, he's got 2 hands on different devices, whether it's lasers or whether it's scalpels, and they're looking at a monitor and doing the operation as if it's a VR type thing, a perfect life imitating life, if you will, or reality imitating non-reality. But it's amazing, and it works. And I've asked one doctor, and her comment was, before it was really hard to get experience doing this. Now we can practice anytime. Before a surgery, after, see what we've done, take a look at it, and there's fail-safes within the hardware to make it even safer. It's fascinating.
Agreed. There is a health warning though, Rick, and you will have seen it on LinkedIn in particular. Lots of people posting up videos of open heart surgery or similar, people doing it in VR. And take it from me, that is not real. That is CGI, that's, effects, whatever it might be. We are a good way away yet from being able to utilize VR to train heart surgeons, if you like, because we just don't have that touch yet. We don't have that precision yet. We don't have feel. People will talk about haptics, and that's a classic. People say, "Oh, can we have touch and feel?" Well, we've got elements of it, but we're still a long way away yet from getting it almost to like it's real, and that's the trick.
In medical, I know they tried this in a lot of different industries. Even eLearning for a while was doing something with it. You remember this is about, 20, 30 years ago? Scratch and sniff. And you would scratch something. They've used it for marketing and advertising. Here, scratch this and smell our new cologne. And it's like, you're about to die when you smelled it. But that's another thing. When you talk about surgeries, there's a lot of smells in surgery that you have to be aware of. And until you can simulate that, even some of the the sounds are pretty easy, but the smells are hard to simulate right now. Almost impossible. And that plays an active part in what surgeons see, smell, because a certain smell might say, we just did something wrong. Or something is ghastly ill with this patient. They may be giving off ammonia or something. So it's just an interesting thing that you're right. We're not there yet. But boy, can you imagine another maybe 15, 20 years?
That doesn't just apply in surgery. You think of an experienced plumber, gas fitter, and how important the sense of smell is to that, and yet that is a vocational skill.
Yes.
And yet I don't know what the situation is in the US, Rick.
Dismal.
But if you're having any work done on your central heating system, it has to be somebody who's been through all the training, and they now call it gas safe.
So
it's
dismal.
Have to have that certification.
I think we talked about this on a previous show, but in the U.S., in most schools, they've totally eliminated any vocational training. So kids that could leave high school with a job later now don't have a chance. And it's the incredible foresight of our just gifted politicians coming up with just stupid ideas. But vocational training was great. They got to touch, feel, see, and do things, whether it was automotive, air conditioning, heating, whatever it was, and that's gone. So it's mostly gone. Some states may still have it, but it's not like it used to be. And it is a shame. And I've worked with one, he was mainly a plumber, but he wanted to create vocational skills training. This is almost 20 years ago, so it's been quite a while. And really it wasn't there yet. The VR didn't really exist at that time, not in any way affordable. And he was ahead of his time. We could do it with some videos, with some simulations, but even then, that was still kind of at the cutting edge, brand new, and the cost was still prohibitive. So he wound up never doing it, but he wanted to do that for all the unions and for all the people that have to be journeymen and get whatever skills they get. But you're right, Lesley, vocational training is one of the best things you could use VR for, but we're only now just getting into that. I'm not sure if anybody's doing a lot of that yet.
Marco will know because, again, vocational training apprenticeships is another one of his passions.
Yeah. It's starting to seep in. People are now testing it and piloting it. So I can see that coming in more and more. And why wouldn't it? It makes absolute perfect sense. And Rick, you've obviously you have perfected your craft here, because that was almost a brilliant segue when you said expensive. Because if we go back to my deck, I'd like to touch on that. There's just a couple of slides prior to before we get to the cost. We can move on from that one. So go forward. That one there. Just go back there. I use this slide whenever I public speaking because this is true. We can literally. Anything we can imagine, we can create. So, people what I'm basically saying is open your mind. Don't try and break away from the 2D box, if you like, because what we're very good at is people look at virtual reality and they try and pigeonhole it into boxes, like we do, but the boxes are incorrect boxes because they're 2D boxes, and the medium is 3D. So what I'm basically saying is open your mind, if you like. So if you go on, I think it's another slide. Yes. So cost. You mentioned cost. Enterprise game changer. So I'm not saying this is, but what I am saying is this is raising the bar, if you like. So if a big barrier to virtual reality adoption has been the ability to scale it. How do you scale it? Now, using Google Cardboard and putting a phone into it, for example, that's not giving you an immersive experience. That's, again, it's putting you in an environment, if you like, so you can do 360 video and you can have a look around, but you can't really do anything in there. So if you want to have an immersive experience, up until now, you've typically had to use something like a Vive, HTC Vive or Oculus Rift, and you've got to set up sensors, and you've got to have a high-powered PC. So you've got to have some technical nous to be able to do it. And actually, it will cost you about $2,500, $3,000 to buy all that equipment. And you've got to set it up in a room, and it's static. It's got to stay in the room. So that's always been a challenge around adoption. But now, released just last week, we have the Oculus Quest, and there's a slide there with the Oculus Quest, and it's showing it in pounds, but it's the same in dollars. So you can buy for $399 a headset that you just put on, 2 controllers, and those controllers give you what we call 6 DoF. So 6 DoF is 6 degrees of freedom. In non-techie terms, that is room scale. I can be wearing a virtual reality headset and I can look all around me 360 degrees. I can control instruments or whatever it might be with my controllers within that environment. And to utilize it, all I have to do now is just put it on my head and press a button and I'm away. So we've now got the ability to scale, because anyone can operate this, and I would argue this is even easier to use than Google Cardboard. And of course, people said all along, "Oh, Google Cardboard's easy, it's cardboard." But actually, do you know what? It takes a while to work out the instructions of how to put the thing together, and then you've got to put your phone in it, and then the phone gets hot, etc., etc. Yeah. So this is easy to set up, easy to use, and it will give you a fully immersive experience. And in this instance, $399. Or £399 as opposed to $2,500, $3,000. This potentially is the game changer. It can give us scale, and there's a link there to a little video, and maybe you want to play that. And there are some games on this that I've actually played and actually play all the time. So yeah, if you click on the link at the bottom there, it should take you to the Oculus page. And then there's a video, watch video. So if you click on the watch video next to the buy now.
This is the one I've been searching for.
So I appreciate that they're showcasing games there, but the reason I wanted you to show it was to just, people can see or extend it, how that might look and feel within a learning experience or a learning environment.
Yeah.
The fact, the one that I liked in particular, and I've played it, is the one with the tennis. Everybody had a Nintendo Wii. Nintendo Wii was brilliant, and everyone played the sports. And if you think back to that, you were stood in front of your TV in your living room, and you had your nunchuck, and you'd be hitting the tennis. That was your tennis racket, and you'd be hitting the tennis ball. With an Oculus Quest or with an immersive technology, but with this Quest, you are now on the tennis court. So you're still in your living room, but you are now on the tennis court. The crowd is around you. You're looking at the crowd. Your opponent is across the net in front of you. You are actually on the tennis court, albeit a virtual tennis court. So if you think about the Nintendo Wii and the sport, you've now brought it actually into your living room.
We're going to have to finish up there, I'm afraid, Marco. We're running.
Cool.
I know we'd a late start, but we're kind of running out of time, my darling.
No, that's fine. That's absolutely fine. And that, I think that was basically it anyway. Apart from just sort of saying, going back to the shiny toy syndrome. VR isn't expensive. Don't believe all the hype. It can be done very, very cost effectively. Yeah. And the call to action, if you like, is go and try it, or join the community and find somebody who's doing something, and experience it for yourself. Because once you do that, that will then open your eyes or your mind as to what you could achieve and utilize it within your business.
And if people then look at the web address that's at the bottom there, I think your contact details are on the website, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah. And you're markable on Twitter.
Markable. Yeah, I am markable on Twitter, so I'm easily reachable on there.
Yeah. Well, it's been
Marco, we'd love
brilliant.
to have you back on the show, talk some
you.
more. I still want to find out more about Silkroad and the China trips. That sounds interesting.
We'll schedule another one, and we'll talk about that.
Let's do that,
because that's a good discussion to have, especially from the perspective of in Asia. They are from a pure learning perspective. They are mobile first, and have been and have always been mobile first. So it's very different, the learning, the adoption and the styles of learning in Asia as it is in the Western world, and it's a good comparison to have.
Yeah, it's interesting.
A good excuse to come back, Marco. A good excuse to come back.
Happy to. I have enjoyed my time with you guys as always. You are rock stars.
Oh, thank you, Marco.
Well, let's see. What do we have for rock star? This might do it. A little bit of music to end the show. Anyway, Marco, really appreciate you coming on. Lesley, as always. And we will see you all next week. If you have any comments, there'll be information below so you can get a hold of Marco. Have a good one, everyone.
Thanks,
we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Don't take off yet. Bye-bye. And it's a wrap.